Yeah, I guess I can. I guess I can start with my first question, which would be we have Akasha team and the Lens protocol here, and we have Suji from Math Network here. I guess like the first question would be, when you are doing your endeavor in terms of revolutionize or funding this new social protocols and platforms, what's like one limitation you're extremely not happy with the current situation? So what's your motivation? And I guess before doing so, maybe like we can have everyone virtually joining and the in-person joining introduce themselves and their projects. Yeah.
Yeah, we started Mass Network back in 2017. We got this idea before that, but I mean, until the ICO bubble, we start to realize, okay, we can use Web3 to decentralize social network. And now it evolved into like a quite huge team with our ecosystem, with our like grant, and we become a middleware, try to bridge the Twitter and the other like Web3 thing, maybe Lens, maybe Blue Sky, try to be compatible. So my extremely unhappy thing is like, at first we were pretty lonely. 2017 to 2020, I remember like 2019, I pitched Vitalik to try our Rat Pocket, and it was fun before the Twitter support sending money. It was really fun. And then we have some like NFT stuff. At first, I think it's really lonely, and then the problem is like people don't compatible with each other, because you mentioned Mastodon, right? We donate a little bit to Mastodon for a few years, and I talked to Eugene, the founder of Mastodon. I say, oh, do you want to try Gitcoin? Because you can raise money there, right? You can get the public good fund. And he like, I don't want to destroy our planet, because he's like super against POW, and he still don't know is POS. So I'm probably gonna pitch again. And then I talked to Blue Sky. That time Blue Sky was still part of Twitter. Before the Elon thing was led by Jay. She's part of the Cash team. So she understands blockchain pretty well, and I was like, maybe you guys can support ENS. And I think she knows the technology, but she don't really want to support blockchain, because she thinks the limitation actually gonna stop the mass adoption. On the other side, you know, like we are running a lot of Mastodon instance. We're running the second largest is from Japan, Kapau, the third largest from Japan, the fifth largest from Europe. And we try to say maybe everyone can have like a unique on-chain profile. Can be ENS, can be Lens. The user are like, oh, you want to do a token, you become like as evil as Elon Musk. So that's really pretty sad that people fail to see the connection. Like all the 5-6 protocol you mentioned, the team, I believe they talk to each other, but I think the user, they don't talk to each other, and they fail to fit this in a bigger mission to revolutionize the Twitter or Facebook, and they're fighting kind of internally. I think that's sad thing, and there's like there's some fundamental ideology. I think that's kind of incompatible right now. So this is my sad thing, and I think we are trying to little bit solve the problem, but I don't have like solution yet. So that's my thinking. Yeah.
Awesome. Let's hand the mic to the Akasha team and Stani.
Hello, everyone. Just checking. Can you hear us all good?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hey, so to echo some of the story that has been shared, we're also around this space for quite some time, and let's say the earliest versions of Akasha were developed around 2015. You know, Meteor and all the Electron. You know, it was a nice MVP, kind of just trying to see if we could work something fully decentralized. And in 2016, on May 3rd, so yesterday, 7 years ago, we announced for the first time Akasha on the World Press Freedom Day. And this idea of freedom of expression started, you know, and it's a value that's deeply rooted in our hearts. Although since the beginning, we also realized that in our approach, decentralization is such an often thrown around word, but often misunderstood. Or, it's like you say the word to 10 people and 10 people have like different ideas on what it actually means. So the freedom of expression in this sense also, as we experimented through all these years, we started to understand it also from the perspective of the collective freedom of expression. And from the early stages in which we have tried to make one decentralized social network, we kind of reached the conclusion of, wait, if it's just one, is it still decentralized? And also in our earliest versions, we started as a fully on-chain, back in the testnet days of Ethereum, thinking that, hey, it's okay. At some point, this scaling thing is going to be solved, by the time it's like a year or two away, 7 years ago. But it's obviously a hard challenge to tackle. And in the meantime, we've also been pushed by this technical limitation to try to see what is the most meaningful and important cryptographic properties that we want to keep in the design of the system, while reducing or eliminating as much as possible the on-chain footprint and the costs associated with the interactions. In the earliest versions, pretty much everything would be an on-chain transaction, which obviously is not the best idea looking back now. And since then, AKASHA as a project has underwent its own evolution alongside Ethereum and this whole space. And most recently, we have shifted our attention from just trying to build one decentralized social network to actually building the toolkit, so to say, with which more people and more communities can build their own social platform. So you have the analogy with the Lego or this composability that you have a parallel in the DeFi space. So we kind of envision the future of social media as maybe a mix mimicking to some extent what we've witnessed with this composability and explosion of innovation and all kinds of cool things being born by developers building on top of each other's work, but applied to social interactions. And speaking of ICOs and tokens, oh man, back in the day, one of the most frequently asked questions like, when ICO? And in our, so to say, defense, we did had this placeholder token that we called AETH because, it was on the test net anyway. And we've treated the economic layer as a module in itself, based on the respect I've gained from witnessing the crypto economic challenge that you have to solve when you introduce a token in the system. It's a very hard thing to do, and there are so many ways in which a system like this can backfire. And humans are very creative, especially when you have like this pot of money in the middle. So since then, we have stick to this idea of not introducing a token in the system. So I think to some extent, this might be actually a really cool things for communities, because this leaves open for every community that would choose to use AKASHA to build their own social platform to introduce their own perception of value. And some forms of value can have these units of accounting, like tokens that have units. The more tokens you have, the richer you are. But there are also other forms of quantifying value in a community. It can be a time bank, or it can be all sorts of other ways, like universal basic incomes. I don't know. There are so many paths that could be taken that we've said better to focus on the basic things, on like where could we make the most impact, and leave this whole layer to the community to explore and build on top of it. And like to share my personal and our personal, so to say, motivation, how this started. Right after we had Ethereum, what back then it was called crowd sale, but in the meantime it kind of shifted through several namings. But anyway, after the version started to pour out, Ethereum as a protocol was getting nearer to launch and so on. I was getting excited, as I suppose other members from the early Ethereum team, on like, okay, once this is out, what would be like the coolest things that we could work on top of Ethereum? And to me, like this idea of like internet freedom of expression and censorship, and there is this also a really delicate line when it comes to what is moderation and what is censorship, has been one of the things that I thought, and I think we still believe it's one of the biggest things that now it's our fingertips. And we now have new tools that we can choose to deploy in new ways to these old problems that are old as, recorded history. So yeah, we are excited, and thank you again for having us here. And yeah, I'm gonna pass the mic to Stani. Thank you.
Hello, Stani.
Hey, Zuzalu City. Yeah,
Can you see us? Actually, can you just see the panelists, or you can see the audience as well?
I don't. I do see now. Yeah. And I have to apologize. My voice isn't the best today,
Okay.
but just to give very, very brief background. So I came into the blockchain space more from looking at blockchain from kind of like a democratization perspective. So what kind of like an accessibility it could provide. So my interest has been in finance over the past, I'd say almost 10 years. And with the Aave protocol and all the work we have been doing in Aave has been regarding to this idea of, how we can actually increase financial and social participation globally, and provide the same opportunity and access to financial opportunities, whatever those might be, for example. So that's kind of like a perspective that we're coming from, and the problem that we tried to solve with Aave. And I think in DeFi, it has been very interesting example where we've been able to create by using blockchain and by using transparent and public ledger, an ecosystem that can increase financial participation. And it's still very small scale, but it's just an example what is the potential. I would say roughly a year and a half ago, I became more interested in solving another problem, which is thinking of like how we are gonna form connections and how we're gonna actually talk about news and also share insights, and how we're gonna interact online in the future. And that's been fascinating because I grew up over the internet. So for me, being born and raised in a smaller Scandinavian country in Finland, with the internet, for example, and my early teen years, I was able to access a lot of information, and that has been very exciting. But I also see that from kind of like a Web2 perspective, a bit down the line, is that Web2 social has actually made it easier to interact with peers, whether it's Facebook or whether it's Twitter or some other social media platforms. So it made it easier to share news, ideas, and also broadcast information across globally and share information. So what I'm kind of like trying to think about from the Web3 social or decentralized social perspective is that, how we can actually increase that those opportunities in social participation, but in a way where we kind of like remove some of the access keys from the platforms and give them to the users, and kind of like change the dynamics in a way where the online presence that you create as a user, it really can't be somehow taken away from you. So you have better guarantees that, for example, the blockchain provides. From the Lens protocol perspective, so Lens is a project that has significant amount of on-chain infrastructure. And the reason for that is that it provides guarantees for, let's say, things that are valuable to you in terms of online presence, which is, for example, profile or the connections you make and connect over time, which is basically your follow graph. But a lot of the things that you can do, for example, posting content, that can happen actually purely on a data availability layer, or in a traditional sense as we use social today. So something I've personally learned and has been fascinating problem to solve is that where DeFi and financial layer has been a lot about how do you ensure the maximum amount of security for financial transactions. In Web3 Social, it's been interesting to understand that what is the amount of security that you need, that you can still offer something for a very big user scale. And for the past year, I've learned quite a lot. So I'm super happy to be here and talk about this, because this challenge of online presence is very natural. People want to connect. People connect beyond online, in real life. But with the online internet infrastructure, we're connecting more. We're digesting more information, finding more information, finding the relevant information online is becoming more harder. And especially with the world of AI, things are changing even faster. So it's definitely like a exciting field to solve, and happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you, Stani. Talking about this, your public presence and your social engagement on online on those online platforms. For me, during the Shanghai lockdown time, during the Hong Kong protest time, during the Ukraine war time, I think my online engagement, online discourse became especially important. And I guess the question goes back to Vitalik. I noticed your Twitter shit posting has decreased throughout the time. So what's your biggest resentment about Twitter?
Yes, I've reverted to the strategy I tested in 2021, which is not tweeting anything except for links to my long form content. And I think I started doing that basically because first because I found that the experience of tweeting is unhealthy to myself, and it's easy to get stuck in doom loops and feel that you have to respond to other people and all of those things, and just get into conversations that are pretty destructive, and just it's a medium that it felt to me like it encouraged grandstanding and not really kind of making actual in-depth arguments for the things that I wanted to express. And I think this year also, the other thing was that I don't know, maybe this is just a bit of a personal grudge with how Elon handled things, but I remember when he first started blocking links to Mastodon and all of the competitors and that, that's not even something that offends one particular political party in the US. That's breaking bedrock principles of fair competition, right? And then to try to apologize for that, he said hey, yeah, let's actually I'll make a poll, and should I stay as CEO? And if the answer is no, I'm not going to be CEO anymore. And
I voted.
Right, I voted too, and I thought, and I said that I thought that was actually a really deeply honorable thing for Elon to do. But the problem is that he then disappointed me by pretty much never following up on that. And I don't know, it kind of doesn't feel right to go back until he follows up on that either. But yeah, at the same time though, I have started to feel even if I continue to do things on Twitter, it feels less like something that either will be or should be the future of online communication in the same way that it was in 2020 and 2021. And so I started exploring a lot of the alternatives in much more depth.
What's your discovery so far?
So I admit Blue Sky is the one that I haven't tried yet, but I have tried. Farcaster and Mastodon and Lens are probably the biggest three that I have tested recently. I think one of the things that I noticed is that especially in the early stages, you're not, if you're making a social media platform, you're not selling an interface. You're not even selling technical properties like decentralization. You're not even selling particular algorithms. what you're selling most of all is a community, right? And like who gets on there first, and like what kind of culture there is at the beginning ends up shaping a lot. And like I noticed deep differences in the cultures of the two, right? Like from a technical perspective, like to me the products looked identical. Like I know Mastodon.
Master coin.
Oh no.
When
I know Mastodon has this feature that there's different servers and you can talk to you can talk between people on different servers, but like I always felt like that was not very well executed, and like it's just like a complicated UI, and I didn't really know how to navigate it well. But like I just basically interpreted both as like a field where like you see on your timeline and you can like and retweet stuff, right? And like from that standpoint, they kind of looked similar. The cultural differences that I noticed were like Farcaster was like very polite. And one of the things that I came to like wonder is whether or not Farcaster like is actually too polite, in the sense that like what Twitter fundamentally is it's an MMORPG, right? It's a massively multiplayer online role-playing game. It's it has millions of players. It's a game. There's a concept of progression. Your follower count goes up. You see, your instead of your like damage and hit points going up, it's like your likes, retweets keep going up. And people play the game because it's fun. And one of the fun things about Twitter is like the PvP aspect, right? And like, you can like
attack.
exactly, like, it feels good to like watch, Autism Capital when they like actually go after the bad guys, right? Like watching them turn against SPF, like that was glorious, and participating can be fun. Getting attacked like is not fun, but you kind of learn to accept it as part of the game. And like that's obviously very misaligned with the experience that a lot of people wants to have. And that's also very misaligned with like what's good for discussion. But it's like a real thing. And like I came to realize that like you can't leave that urge completely unsatisfied. And I don't know, like I don't have like conclusions from this. It's like just one of those things where like like often you realize that like there's it's one of those yin yangs where there's like a bad thing deep embedded like right in the middle of the good thing, and there's like a good thing embedded right in the middle of the bad thing, and like it's you realize that it's complicated. But still, like in general, Farcaster, like it's a nice community. It's it is high quality. The other thing that I noticed is like the levels of like I'm used to a high level of engagement, and like I noticed missing that high level of engagement
In
And-
Farcaster.
Yeah, but that's just because like the crowd is smaller, right?
Yeah.
So that was also one of those just like things I noticed that like, hey, this is a problem they have to solve. On Mastodon, I felt like there's aspects of the culture that kind of rub the wrong way with me personally. Like it just sometimes feels like, this kind of like a little bit too like self-righteous people who understand, who are the people who are, what and who is responsible for what's wrong with the world. And like, if you're one of those, you're a bad guy, and this kind of like deep, concern vibe where we're supposed to agree what we're concerned about. And I don't know it on like some intuitive level that felt like something that was like more unappealing to me. And then with Lens, I thought, I'm trying to think. Like, I mean, I admit to using it less than both of the other two. I think, well, how did I get? I mean, you can post and you get a lot of responses. I think it was like maybe the closest thing I have to a criticism is like so far it felt not different enough from Twitter, which is like both good and bad. But I don't know, like this was like low information, and I admit I need to, like go back and try more.
Right.
And then Noster only like tried setting up an account, and like I don't really approve of the whole thing where you have to like put your private key in the interface. Like, but and then I look forward to trying Blue Sky as well. So that's like my perspectives of those, just like from a user, sort of like, do I enjoy it in the way that it'll make me keep coming back, sort of perspective. I mean, from a like philosophical properties of the thing perspective, I feel like it's still very early in a lot of ways, right? Like the whole, like, there's a lot of these philosophical arguments that like why like federation is fundamentally unstable, right? I think I forget the name. It was like some like person named Sarah who identifies as a crypto anarchist. Sorry, I forget. Who wrote this very good article that I like forget the title, but it basically made the point that like, hey, federation has incentives that are like very centralizing, and like we'll see, like whether or not that actually happens. And then, with Farc, I think with all the others, like they're trying to solve this moderation of, or this problem of like, can we create something other than like the black box moderation algorithm box for solving the problem of like helping people see stuff that they want to see and not stuff that they don't want to see. And like, that's a very subjective thing. And like, I think all of their solutions basically kind of eventually boil down to like, let's, let's not create like a single box that we all fight over. Let's like try to create choice between, different algorithms, like different recommendation systems, like something based on people you follow or something. But like that ecosystem hasn't like actually fleshed out enough for me to feel like I can actually judge any part of it.
Cool. Yeah, talking about, actually, I do want to challenge, other founders here. Stani's here, Suji's here, AKASHA Foundation is here. So we learned the AKASHA Foundation is trying to design this grind framework for the next generation social. And for Lens protocol is, if you have a Lens handle, then your social graph are all NFTs. If I follow Suji, if Suji follows me back, or become like my on-chain NFTs, that's being, associated with my Ethereum address. And the Mask network is trying to basically bridge your Web2 identity with your Web3 identity by, developing identity protocol to browser extension to mobile clients. So I guess my question for, the three team as well as Vitalik himself would be, what's the one differentiator for your project that can offer to the audience? Like, can we do something, like, can we think out of this Twitter box where we don't be like, okay, we're going to invent the next generation Twitter by copying Twitter's model and spark a little bit blockchain magic on top of it? What's your like one key differentiator? And for Vitalik, if you do design a network, what will be the one thing you want to promote or you want to change? So I guess we can start from Suji.
I mean, like when I start this like idea, I think I recognize myself more like an engineer back in 2021, but after 2021, I think I try to be more diverse, have more solid experiments. So I was thinking about the railway, actually, the railway and the flight, the commercial flight. So at first, it is very, very owned by private company, right? Like Andrew Carnegie. And I used to live in Chicago. So you see like all these street names, building names are named by railway tycoons. And I think then the interesting happened is like through many different law and different legal pressure, like people revolutionized industry. It's getting a little bit worse, but it kind of like kill all the tycoon, and eventually these kind of systems are become more public infra. And it's a good case, and especially it's a good case in Japan. I also live in Tokyo for a very long time. That if at first it's private owned, then become nationalized, and then it become privatized again. And the railway station is losing money, right? If you walk into a railway station, JR is losing money, but it contributes to the GDP, like the GDP of Tokyo a lot. Like one railway station, one subway station can contribute to like even 1% of the whole Tokyo GDP, because the traffic was there, and they start to invest in the real estate around this thing and start to build hotels in, I don't know, I started thinking about like maybe social networks should never make money, make money, and the token itself should be used if we do have a token, and Lens I think probably will have token. I think eventually it should be used as like a community-owned venture vehicle. So this is my opinion. I think social network should never own money and never make money itself. And to look at Tencent, half of the revenue is from investment. And look at like Facebook, half of the growth is from acquisition. So I think maybe social network is like the railway station and like the airport. It should be constantly losing money, but it should be able to thrive the surroundings, and the surroundings should have like a feedback system able to make it running. So that way, I was thinking maybe we should just help users steal back their data from Twitter, and just don't tell them not to move to. I mean, like definitely they should move to another Web3 social network. Before they move, they should try our solution to steal back their data, and somehow make the social network losing money. And eventually, we help build the surroundings and feedback the infra, and that kind of like was the Japan railway story, that it become privatized, become nationalized, and privatized again. But I think in social network, we probably going to see this in 10 to 20 years. In the railway, it took 100 years. So that's my feeling right now. And so let's tell the key difference that we probably are the only team that try to tell people how to steal back the data from Twitter. The rest of the team are like, oh, we have a Wonderland, people come. And we're like, oh yeah, sure, you should come to Wonderland ABC, but I'll just tell you, like, you can do this to hurt a little bit of Elon. And even back to the Jack time, we tell people how to steal back the data through our extension somehow, and we don't own them. We just go back to the users. That's my feeling. I'm still thinking about it, but like it always reminds me of the huge railway station I saw. And I said, like, that's probably the future of social network, because it's like a forum. It's a public interface. Like people, come and go. Yeah, that's my feeling. How about you, Vitalik?
I think one of my beliefs on this is that it's going to be very hard to beat Twitter by making a Twitter that is just slightly better. Like Twitter itself did not try to be a better Facebook. It invented a totally new category of activity, right? Like Facebook itself, did not try to be a better MySpace. It invented a new category of activity. Like if you look at the things that actually like people are saying actually might be taking like market attention share away from Twitter, it's like, well, TikTok, like it invented a new category of activity, right? And so I think like if we want to make something better, like we have to invent a new category of activity. And I mean, okay, one possible answer to this is like, Zuzalu, we've invented the new category of activity already, right? And like, literally, think about the question of like, maybe what we actually want is, well, if we expand that category a bit more and like, let's say include DAOs, right? What we actually want is to really create like social tools that are designed around like this new category of activity of like basically helping small and medium-sized groups to kind of tightly coordinate across wide ranges of projects, right? And like that's at least a new thing that's not being served to the same extent already, right? Like there's it's like something in between like Slack and Discord and Twitter and a couple of other things, together with like in-person infrastructure is one example, right? Like the calendar feature in the Zuzalu website has been like super successful, right? So like that's just one example, but I think like one really underexplored path to kind of creating the new social media is to try to like actually figure out like what is some new category of activity that it makes sense to create and that has a natural alignment with the ideals that we care about, and kind of like push that as a package instead of like pushing for like Twitter plus a small vector.
Okay, what about Stani? What do you think?
No, I do believe there is like
I think you're muted, Stani.
Oh, do you hear me now? Hello?
A bit, but it's quiet.
Yeah, a bit, but it's really quiet. Can you say something again?
Hello, what if I yell?
Yeah.
What if I yell?
Okay, that's please
Better.
keep yelling.
Okay, I keep yelling. Yeah, I do think there's a lot of emphasis on Twitter. For example, something that is interesting is that when we launched the Lens protocol a year ago, we didn't really have clients. So the design space was a bit more open, what people will actually build on top of the protocol. But I think also like most of the crypto community is fairly speaking in crypto Twitter. So the algorithms finds the people that are relevant, and you get this kind of like echo chamber there. And crypto Twitter is relatively new thing as well. It's been a few years, but a lot of the actual previous discussions regarding, for example, Ethereum has been in Reddit, Bitcoin Talk, and I do believe there's definitely opportunities to build something new. I mean, DAO governance, now a lot of the governance discussions are on forums, which are server hosted, but that could be a good opportunity there. But I also think that when we build these protocols, we kind of like build from the mindset of Twitter as well, and the data structures and whatnot. And we really rate the things that has been built so far, also from the perspective that they're very infant in terms of the Lens ecosystem. For example, we saw first clients like Lancer, Orb, and Butterfly, and they really were focusing on text-based content. And two of the clients are now shifting more towards how we could actually serve the creators that are discovering Web3 and discovering things that actually are useful for creators in Web3. And one of the interesting things that goes pretty well with decentralized social, or let's say like partially blockchain-based social, is the monetization aspect, because you're able to actually create artifacts that represent social networking. So that's profile, the follower graph, distribution of content, but at the same time, you're able to add monetization there. So if you share content, you could get monetized from there. So I think there's like a lot of opportunities there, where as the ownership goes towards people who are using these networks, they're able to actually get the net benefit from the network. The challenge is actually more on the design space. So designing social networks is particularly challenging, because you have to think about all the way, not just the user experience, but how you do the actual growth hacking part. So if you think about how many social media or social applications there are per year and the success of it, there are a lot of applications, but there's a lot of also, what I'm saying is that it's very difficult to build a social media application that is everlasting. We see that with Be Real, for example, we see the numbers going up and going quickly down again. And it's very hard to also compete against social networks like Twitter, where the network effects is driving the traction back to the platform. And I think where the big opportunity is that if we actually create a design space where it's relatively easy to bootstrap audience and get distribution, and you can build faster experiences, you kind of decrease that failure ratio as well. So for example, if you build a super exciting application and it might fail, but your next application is more interesting and it provides a different kind of discovery. For example, you can use the same users that are already in the same network and bootstrap from that audience. And second thing, I think what's exciting to monitor a bit is that when you have a network where you have maybe like 20 different kinds of use cases with shared user base, how the actual monetization happens between those different clients and also algorithms and services that they might be using, and how that could be interestingly powerful as well as a network effect itself. So I think it's just very early, and that's why a lot of the examples are in Twitter, because that's where the most of the attention is. But as long as we build and make it easier to actually build on Web3 social, and we reuse existing successful recipes. So for example, content discovery is a very hard thing to solve, or let's say something like bots or low signal, high signal content. How do you actually match that with the users that are seeking that kind of a content? And being able to leverage existing algorithms into new things that is being built. And I think that's where the open computation comes in place, because one of the unique features that Web3 social has is that usually these networks are open to compute for anyone. So there's kind of like a demographic access for anyone to come, build an algorithm. And there is a slight incentive also to make that algorithm public in the sake of distribution, and maybe create a bit more advanced algorithm for monetization perspective, and reusing those components into something existing. So I think maybe those social networking, even in the future, might look like a shared user base. And in some ways, you already see this in Ethereum itself. So, you know, Ethereum is a big social network, and there's a lot of applications and a lot of games that, you know, are happening. You have a lot of DeFi games, a lot of yield games there, NFT games. People go and buy and sell. So you have like this kind of like a social behavior there. And I think that's something like where the kind of like future lies. So how quickly you can bootstrap from an existing audience and build new things and experiences relatively quickly.
Okay, thank you so much, Stani. And then we can go to the AKASHA team. And can probably.
Hello, can you hear us? Hey, hey, hey.
Yes.
Hey, back in action. I think the question was how do we differentiate among other Web2 and Web3 social project initiatives, if I'm not mistaken. So to share from our perspective, you know, I mentioned in the beginning that our journey started with the full on-chain, exploration. And along the journey, we also searched for this way on how we can remove the costs for interactions, like people in general, you know, speaking of Twitter versus other, you know, Web3 projects that are in this space. People in general are not enthusiastic about, you know, spending money, even if it's a small amount for interacting with each other. They're now used with this free interaction, even if, you know, in some ways, sometimes maybe it's a good idea to have some friction in the design of the interactions. However, if we are talking about mainstream adoption, probably this is one of the blockers that we somehow need to figure out. So in our case, how we decided to go about it is to have this off-chain first approach, but by storing proofs in an immutable by default fashion. And for this, you know, we use a combination of IPFS, ceramic network, and other available Web3 technologies. So it's like reusing and building on top of the work of others as much as possible without trying to reinvent the wheel. Where it, you know, it's not making sense. Better to focus on building on top of each other and contributing to each other's work as much as possible, strengthening the Web3 ecosystem as a whole, because this is such a big challenge that I feel not a single project, unfortunately, has the solution to this. It's something that's still a work in progress and such a big challenge that you know, I think to some extent we owe it to ourselves, and humanity deserves a better communication system in this day and age, considering the tools that we have at our disposal. And besides this, you know, we've integrated decentralized identifiers pretty much everywhere, and verifiable proofs as much as possible as a way to leverage these cryptographic signatures and the verifiability aspect. And besides this, you know, you have this user-owned data paradigm by default, where, you know, the control over the data is in the hands of the user as a principle. You know, I think to some extent this should be a default there, not a feature. But sadly, we are still at the stage where, yay, this is a feature, you know, I hope one day privacy will be by default something that you don't need to tell, like, hey, this is private or privacy So besides this, there are a bunch of things, and as we went through this process and iterated, we've built, I think now we are at the fourth generation of social networking platforms that we've kind of built and rebuilt from scratch each time, kind of understanding the things that we can do better. And in the process, there are some things that sometimes we have inherited, almost like a hangover from the Web 2 world. And one of these is, for example, this idea of, the like button or the heart or the star. Sometimes, the like button as a whole was introduced by Facebook. And as you can guess, it was not necessarily thought in the best interest of the users. It was probably designed as a way to understand better the signals. So, oh, you like that. Oh, here's an ad for you. Now that we know what you like better. And the fact that it kind of fueled this discovery, your friend like that was more of a side effect, at least in my opinion, because ultimately most of the Web2 social platforms are advertising platforms mainly, with the social functionality being more secondary to the core business model. Yeah, sadly. And besides this, there's also this aspect as we've iterated through all these versions, that the moderation, it's also one of these super thorny, hard to solve challenges. And I don't think anyone has solved it yet, but one of the ways in which we thought that maybe we can tackle this is, instead of, thinking about the perfect moderation system, which is, I think, somewhat still a fantasy, we can instead focus more on thinking about how it can be a modular moderation system. So, for example, in a community, maybe there are some moderation systems that might be more top-down. In other communities, maybe you have other ways in which the community itself can do a more liquid democracy, delegated type systems, or completely decentralized, hopefully one day, in which you have some kind of randomness in the process, and from a pool of people that are willing to dedicate a few minutes or hours or days from a month, you would be presented now and then with, hey, what's your opinion about this post? Is it okay according to the code of conduct of this community, or is it not? And, this is again, such a big challenge, that the best way we thought of solving it is to provide options to the community so they can build their own moderation systems. And we have also, started, and we are working on providing one, but we think of it more as a starting point that hopefully will inspire other communities to come up with their own systems of moderation, because this is again such a big challenge to solve. And besides this, there is also another big topic here when it comes to governance, and bringing decentralization back into the mix here. You have multiple ways in which you can kind of place the burden of responsibility from operating a social platform. It's ideally, that, or I'm not sure ideally, but usually when you are faced as a platform operator with a request to take down a certain piece of content, depending on the jurisdiction where you operate, or even if it's a DAO, I'm a big fan of the idea and the principles that are behind the DAO as an idea. However, in practice, I say sometimes it's disappointing, because in some situations it's basically plutocracy disguised as democracy, which is, the one with the biggest bags has the most say, and that's not necessarily I think an upgrade to democracy, or something that we want to tend towards in the future. I mean, if we think of something like a social network, right? And along this line of thought, in the early days of Ethereum, I was among the people that I have spearheaded the legal and the business sort of infrastructure behind setting up the Ethereum crowdfunding and the let's say the legal strategy and the headquarters. So because we reached a point, speaking from past experience, where developers, were starting to, and people contributing to Ethereum as a project, were starting to ask us like, hey, should I be worried if I contribute to this project? Because, well, now things, let's say, are slightly better than back then. Now maybe it's more gray, but back then it's like, like cryptocurrency, and say, hey, what about the children, and all the, actions starting from fear, not from curiosity. And more recently, we have looked into a way in which we can get, let's say, the best out of both worlds. So on one side, when you talk about DAOs, I think many people, even especially, I would say, the people that are not necessarily technical at heart, resonate with this idea of empowerment and having transparency, and this idea of distributed resource management, and all these things that DAOs do so well as a new type of organization. But when it comes to blockchain and code is law, we have had in the past, and we still have some let's say cases from a legal perspective that are now going to set precedents. And you have like DAOs that are being challenged by SEC and other type of like legal jurisdictions. And among the blessings or the curses, if you do not have any jurisdictions where your DAO is actually operating from, you're legally exposed to all the jurisdictions. So, in theory, if a member of a DAO is just a member of a DAO, that member of the DAO could be held liable in a number of jurisdictions for the actions that the DAO takes as an organization. There are, on this note, just a brief note, there are some laws and projects in motion in some, I think California is one of the states that is trying to bring this idea of non-profit DAOs and to make it as a legally recognized form. But, USA so far has not been the best, let's say, jurisdiction for doing a crypto project because of the, whole CFTC, SEC kind of dance around, is it a commodity, a currency, or something else when it comes to cryptocurrency. And just to kind of bring this point to a conclusion, based on this legal hacking, so to say, because like social networks, they do need to be operated somehow by someone, led us to this idea that we could, for example, use Switzerland as, centralization, some might say. But, on the other side, Switzerland as a country is among the most decentralized countries on this planet. So you could say that in some way, maybe it's the minimum viable centralization that you could insert in this governance entity. So the members participating in the operation and the governance of the platform would be protected from personal liability as part of the organization. And the association is basically customized in a way that, this is actually a really cool thing. Because usually when you start an association, the first question is, okay, so who's the president? And, it's like, come on, man, like, can we do something without the king on the hill? And, at first, like, it's like, wait, what? And the association needs a president. What do you mean? Like, where's the king? And that's also the way in which most, let's say, enforcement agencies and so it's like, whose head should we behead here? And as part of the design process in designing this architecture of the legal entity, we came up with a way in which we basically split, or let's say the powers that were concentrated and the responsibilities concentrated in one function, or actually in three functions, the president, the secretary, and the treasurer. We split those functions into 7 panels that each of them have like a dedicated responsibility and specialization. And in these panels, we have like a number that could be, again, customizable. We have like now a limit of up to 9 people, but these groups would be, let's say, maybe in some way a parallel to working groups, that some of them might have like, let's say, the projects and grants responsibility. Others might have the technical responsibility, and so on and so forth. And with the mention that this structure puts the entire, let's say, power of decision in the hands of the members through a democratic process. So We can use the Ethereum keys and decentralized identifiers as way in which the members of the organization can, let's say, authenticate and verify that it's me. I am a member of this organization and I have this vote without having necessarily a token inserted into the picture. A token can be inserted, but it's not necessary to achieve this result. And I think this is going to be super exciting, and we are kind of looking towards this new paradigm that will probably coexist alongside DAOs. And it's going to be, let's say, a decentralized autonomous association type of entity that would be operating a decentralized social platform. So there are some trade-offs, of course, and the purists one might say, yeah, but it's a jurisdiction and it's centralized. But on the other side, besides the cons, you also have the pros that we've talked about a bit here. And just lastly, because of the layers and how we've kind of architected these things, of course, Ethereum all the way, baby, and that's in the heart there forever. But because we've been kind of redesigning and like had this opportunity of looking at the foundational layers on top of which we can build things, this time, and the latest generation of the architecture that we've implemented is also chain agnostic. So we imagine this community-centric approach to social platforms, and in a near future, hopefully, we could also envision something like Zuzalu.world. We call these communities worlds. And within this context, Zuzalu as a community could decide on what's acceptable in these communities, what's not acceptable here, and have this kind of democratic, decentralized way of managing things in a transparent and efficient way without getting, bogged down onto legalities further down the road, and focusing on like what the community does best, collaborate. And in this regard, I would just like to say one more thing. We've been talking a lot about information, and there's also this pyramid of knowledge, or I'm not sure what's the name of it now. It doesn't come to mind, but you have this idea that you have like the bottom layer being the data, on top of it you have the information, on top of it you have the knowledge, and the peak, the pinnacle of this would be wisdom. And I think we are still maybe looking at the wrong things here. The data availability layers, and you have like blockchains, you have IPFS, and a bunch of other technologies that can provide this availability of data in general. And on top of this, the interfaces that we are building and so on could be seen as the information and the communication systems through which information is shared among the participants. But when it comes to the knowledge generation and how the communities can become wiser from all this information, I think we are still getting started there. And maybe that's one of the most exciting things that we can hopefully bring a contribution towards with this new generation of social platforms.
Yeah, absolutely. Really, really appreciate that very amazing talk. And I do want to do some interactive stuff with the audience, but we do have 20 to 30 minutes towards the end of this entire event. So by the time, I really would want to invite you all to come and say a few things you do want to suggest to those amazing builders. As AKASHA team is going through this team building on International Star Wars Day. So we want to, get their attention and tell them, what actually the users want. So